Happy Red Friday in Kansas City. Welcome in. Thanks for joining us on KCMO Talk Radio. And we are always grateful for the time of our next guest, Daniel Turner. He's with Power the Future. He joins us on KCMO Talk Radio. And, you know, they're the voice of energy workers pushing back on the crazy green groups and all the folks who fund them. So they're doing outstanding work every single day. And, you know, we're looking at the pump here in the Kansas City area, and depending on where you're at, you know, you're approaching easily $4 a gallon. Daniel, I got to imagine where you are on the East Coast, it's even higher by now. Good morning.
Yeah, I'm in rural Virginia, and it's probably around the same price. And sadly, it's going to either stay at this point or it's going to go higher in the foreseeable future. Oil is at $93 a barrel, and most people believe it's going to go higher than that. And that's tragic because for the average American family, that is a huge cost burden that's eating away at their monthly budget.
Yeah, I see California is topping 6 in some places already. So what happened? Back in July, it was down near 70. It's skyrocketed the last couple of months. What's going on?
Yeah, well, two things happened in the last couple of months. One, President Biden stopped dipping into the Strategic Petroleum Reserves. He was taking over 1 million barrels a day out of the reserves and dumping it into the general oil commodities market. And that was driving down price because it was artificially driving up the supply. And it was effective. He started doing this in 2022 to keep the Senate, and it worked, right? So yes, it's terrible for national security, of course. It's terrible for the country. But for the crisis of the Biden administration, it was absolutely necessary. So that's one thing that's happened. And then two, all of our OPEC adversaries have announced that they are keeping production cuts through the end of the year. So the supply globally is down quite a bit. And so, yeah, these stubborn problems are going to persist. I guess I could even throw out a third. China is finally waking up from their several years of COVID lockdown. The Chinese government has spent hundreds of millions of dollars in artificial stimulus, things that we used to do and still do in this country. And that artificial stimulus is meant to try to revive their economy, which has really been kicked in the teeth for the last 3 years because of COVID lockdowns. So, you know, the China economy is starting to wake up, and that means they're going to start using more oil too. So you add all those together, added to the fact that we're not producing enough oil here domestically, you're going to get high prices.
Well, it's classic, demand is going to exceed supply, and we're doing this to ourselves, and we're shooting ourselves in the foot because the people in charge don't want to be energy independent. And I just don't get it, Daniel, because I would think if nothing else, going into an election year, they would want to keep these prices as low as possible. And I guess they realize they can't keep dipping into the strategic reserves, at least for a little bit here. They got to take their foot off the pedal on that front.
Yeah, they do, because, you know, we only have about a month supply of crude right now.
Wow.
And if there were to truly, exactly, that's terrifying.
What are we supposed to have? What are we supposed to have?
3 months.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So imagine the worst case scenario of a hurricane or, God forbid, an act of war that wipes out the oil and gas industry. A month's supply is not a lot of oil, right? And especially when you need this oil for, you know, we're not talking about driving the kids to soccer practice. We're talking about moving military and troops and moving supplies around the country in that, again, ultimate worst case scenario, that black swan scenario of some sort of a disaster. So, yeah, he put the nation genuinely in a precarious situation. But what's the response is fingers crossed. And that's what the Biden administration does with energy policy. Our energy policy is fingers crossed there's not a natural disaster. Fingers crossed there's not a heat wave in Texas and the grid falls. What are they saying now about the whole Northeast? Let's hope it's not a cold winter, right? That's not really policy.
Yeah.
Right? That's kind of the epitome of immaturity and lack of planning and lack of I mean, don't we elect our elected officials for more than just, let's roll the dice and hope hope it doesn't come up short.
It's crazy. Daniel Turner, Power of the Future, is joining us on KCMO in Kansas City. So, Daniel, I wish this would have come up a little bit more at the debate the other night, but boy, that thing was such a disaster. I mean, I have friends at Fox. I know you do as well, but gosh, that was such a mess. And unfortunately, I feel like you and I have done. I've learned more in the last 5 minutes from you than I did the entire 2 hours the other night, especially on this issue.
Well, I appreciate that. I often used to look at presidential debates when I wasn't sure or I didn't really know the candidates. I'd watch them and think, okay, who do I like more at the end of the debate? I watch these debates and now I think, boy, I like these people a lot less. It seems that everyone hurts themselves. I think the candidates are performing so poorly. They are desperate to go up in the polls. They know the lead that President Trump has on them. They have rehearsed these terrible lines and jokes that they think are gotcha moments that they just squeeze them in when they make absolutely no. It's like the guy who memorized the joke and goes to a dinner party and just has to somehow work it into the conversation even when it's not appropriate. That's what the whole debate was.
That is such a good analogy, and it's so cheesy. It's so forced. We all see through it. And I know you know these folks a lot better than I do, but there's a lot of people making a lot of money in and around D.C. writing these horrible lines for these guys and gals. It's just it's cringeworthy, and they're making a lot of money doing this.
Exactly. Huge fees go to political consultants, and a lot of prep work went into those debates. And I've been part of debates. I've been part of debate prep before. So I know the amount of work that goes into it, but really I'm scratching my head thinking, this is how you prepared your candidate? I thought, case in point, Ron DeSantis' strongest moment was at the very end when they were going to play the game on the tablet, write down the person who shouldn't be here, when he said, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to play this game. I am above these antics. And all the other members of on stage had started writing. But when Ron DeSantis said, I'm not doing it, they all put their pens down. That is the leadership that Ron DeSantis and his campaign has been telling us he exhibits. He finally exhibited it at the end when it was unscripted, when he was authentically himself. Otherwise, every time they asked Ron DeSantis a question, you could see him flipping through the book in his mind. Page 37, third paragraph. Oh, that's the line I want to make sure I hit. Mm-hmm. I just feel like if the candidates were themselves, I'll put it in the simplest terms, Pete, if you have to try to be authentic, you're not authentic, right?
Yes.
You shouldn't have to struggle to be yourself.
Mm-hmm. That is very well said. Well, and one thing that did come up when energy policy came up here, Daniel, the nuclear issue came up, and it was brought up by a couple of candidates. I only have a little bit of time here, but take me through the valuable nature of nuclear energy and why we should be utilizing it and talking about it more.
Absolutely. I think Vivek mentioned it. I think Doug Burgum, who I thought actually did the best of the debate candidates, I think he mentioned it as well. France has 80% of its electricity generated by nuclear power. They sell it to other European countries at a surplus, and they make money off of it. If it is good enough for the French and they're not afraid and they're not, screaming 3 Mile Island, it should be good enough for the Americans. There should be micronuclear reactors across this country. We should be building dozens of them. Electricity should almost be free rather than the 30% more we're paying under the Biden administration. So, yes, definitely pro-nuclear, especially in remote places like Alaska and Hawaii that are paying outrageous fees for their electricity.
Yeah. Daniel Turner, well said. Follow him on social media with Power of the Future. They're doing great work, pushing back against the green energy crazy. Daniel, hey, have a great weekend, my friend. Thanks for hopping on with us on KCMO.
Always a good time, Pete. Thanks for having me on.
You as well. He does great work, and glad we got to get him on here on a Friday morning.